Somebody read the first step of the superficial front line.
Contractions to tibialis anterior.
Thank you. So of course we could do these compressions of the tibialis anterior through the sheets or even with clothes on. Just so you can see what I'm doing better, we will do it on the skin. So you've done this before, but the first time you did compressions on tibialis anterior, you know, you didn't know the muscles as well. And but it's the same what you already started with. So you can use different tools, as it were, fingertips, thumbs, base of your hands, knuckles, fists, just like we've been doing all along with compressions on the lower leg and the leg. Don't be shy about getting some medial rotation going. A lot of folks have excessive lateral rotation. And the tibialis anterior, to be clear, you'll always feel the front of the shin bone because there's no muscle on it. So there's a harder bone in front, and then just lateral to that is tibialis anterior. So in this first inch, lateral to tibialis anterior. So that's where we're going to focus. And your zoom is up top. And assessing as we go. Jade is really, Mary and Jade are really good at this. Mary, could you help a little?
I'm good now.
You're
I'm
good.
I want Mary to be able to watch the demo.
It pops off as well. You can
Cool.
release it to get a good angle. And these fascial lines, right, they cross into the fascia in front of the ankle here, which would be our retinacula, and makes a connection with the fascia of the posterior back line. So I'm helping make those connections with the feet, front and back. But warming up, right? Taking advantage of that thixotrophic effect. We want to warm things up. And can someone read the next one, please?
Cross-handed stretch on the lower leg and right lateral for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, when it says cross-handed stretch, you can literally cross your hands for this, but what's most important is that you are engaged with the tissue, that you're stretching the tissue, twist it a little, hold that tension steady, and keep following the unwinding. So sometimes your hands will literally be crossed, and sometimes you'll find it easier to not cross them. Now, when I do cross my hands, I find that it's helpful if I'm using them as a leverage tool. So I'm using it like a wheelbarrow and using them to push against each other. And at the moment, I'm using my thumbs, but you could use knuckles or other tools. And you can find where it's tightest. Here's a nice tight spot. Is that too intense? But I am in the actual muscle tissue of tibialis anterior, right? This is not like a subcutaneous fascial stretch. So you're at the depth of a muscle. And if you try to fight the fascia, if you try to fight the muscle, and that includes in a straight line, it is pound for pound stronger than steel, you are not going to win. So you kind of are tricking the fascia, or you're warming it up and gently unwinding it. So I'm adding a little twist. You can experiment with exactly what direction twist. It might not look like I'm adding a twist, right? Because the work is so slow. That's why I'm talking to you about what I'm doing, because it might just look like compression. And we're slowly traveling. Now, a funny thing about the way this feels is that some clients think it feels amazing and they can feel all these connections and they're like, oh my God, that's releasing all the way up into my head. And this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. And other people will be like, I don't feel anything. Some people, it feels like warmth. Some people, it feels even like aching. So your client will have different reactions. But one thing I do want to say is that it's not necessarily going to feel like if you use a 1 to 10 scale and 7 was like the amount of pressure they enjoyed most. It's not always going to be at a 7 for this release to happen, but you still never want to go past a 7. So sometimes this will feel like, oh, that feels so good. And you are at a depth that feels amazing. And other times it won't really be that deep. But of course, we're not exceeding. So does this feel like if we used a 1 to 10 scale and 7 was perfect pressure, where would we be at?
That's 7.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're kind of going so slowly and it's not repetitive twisting motions. So not usually so much, yeah. You can see how pink it is where I was. You know, even just one release will do that. And Taylor, you know, this little boo-boo has a bruise, yeah.
Oh, do I have a
Yeah.
something there? Cool.
I always call it out, right, so you don't get blamed later. You're doing a little bit of deep, slow work there, and you don't want there to be any mystery about who caused that bruise, what caused that bruise. So I kind of work things out in between. Again, you can use different tools. You don't always have to be cross-handed. If you're watching my hands really closely, you might see some almost imperceptible movement, maybe like a turtle crossing a cage. But I am, or maybe it's a wild turtle.
Maybe a snail.
It's out in nature.
Maybe a snail.
A snail.
Yeah.
So I am following this tissue and not losing the stretch. And I'm just moving a little bit. Yep.
Are you using this part?
I am, yes. So at this point, I'm only focused up towards the head, proximally. So you don't always have to have an opposite hand in each direction. Sometimes you can just focus one side or the other. And there's going to be periods where you speed up and slow down. But snail speed up, snail slow down.
Even sloth, right? I think they're pretty slow too.
Yeah. But if you can see that I am moving a little bit. And what does that feel like, Taylor?
I feel, yeah, the movement. I think snail is a good descriptor.
Okay, you see how I'm engaged in that tissue there? There's a tight spot. I'm gonna hang out with it. You can even jostle it a little, but not in a way where you're losing the stretch. And on that 1 to 10 scale, where's the pressure?
7.
Cool. I can feel there's some tight spots here. So I want to make sure that I don't hit any exquisite spots. And we're coming to a bony junction. The fascia is going to weave into it and cross over it. So I don't want to lose the fascia, but I might need to lighten up to cross the bones. But the fascia keeps going. And again, you don't always have to take it this far every single time. But if you feel like you're on a good, like unwinding tight spot, sometimes you are going to keep going. Now the snail is racing. Very fast snail. Got some cruising going on there. But you see just one pass and how pink, soft it gets. Yep. And what's next? All right, cool. Thank you. So we're going to warm up the quads. And they've got, of course, fascia weaving throughout them and between them. And what's next?
Cross-handed stretch upper leg, one hand on anterior, superior iliac spine, and under just above patella.
Thank you. So basically now we're going to do our MFR on the thigh, and sometimes we can go all the way from the patella all the way to the ASIS or AIIS. But I noticed there's some bound up fascia right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the pattern of it, or in other words, the shape of it. So I want my hands to kind of fully get the shape of the tightness. And then I'm going to lift and squeeze and twist.
Was that the S one?
It is like it, but I'm doing it more like a straight MFR because I'm on a big muscle here and not just a tendon. Yeah, but it's a similar idea. And how's that intensity for you? Sweet. Good. So you can see we're really getting in there. Again, sometimes folks kind of with MFR, they think you're always on the surface, but you're not, right? You're at whatever level the fascial tightnesses are. Now I reassess and a lot of that let go. And up here, there's a very tight spot. And so again, we want to get the shape of it. And whatever tool gets that shape of it, could be your hands together. It could be a forearm, an elbow, a fist. And I'm going to use like if I was a starfish and every little tiny surface of my hand had those little sucker things. Because I want to attach to the shape of this pattern. You know, have you ever seen the really pretty purple ones and they get all in the crevices? Would be like, we're going to find like what is the shape of what's going on here? There it is. There's the tightness. I find that shape, I match it, I stick to it, and I stretch it. And I don't ever try to stretch it in a straight line or I will lose. Not that I'm trying to winning, I'm trying to help. So I'm going to experiment with little twisty movements. There we go. And some direction's going to go easier than others. Make your life easy, take it in an easy direction. This way's harder, and that's going to be more intense for him, right? Now, I'll tell you something though. If your client likes the intense feelings, take them in the intense direction, right? But if they don't need intense feelings, take them in the easy direction. They will both be effective, but one will feel more intense to the client. Do you like the more pressure, less pressure? We'll go, yeah. That's what I would like to. There's no need to be excessive here. And a little more stretch. Right on that. Good. Thank you. Oh, there we go. There we go. It's going. What does that feel like to you, Taylor?
It's a release. It's weird. Like,
Yeah. Whoosh.
Yeah.
I was like, whoosh. And some massage therapists, I told you the other day, some massage therapists will sweat during the releases. It's confusing if you're going through hot flashes, when you're feeling hot flashes and when you're feeling releases. But I no longer hot flash, so I'm feeling the heat of a release.
So when you do that, you go like all the way up to
You can, yep.
and
Yeah.
Your other hand go all the way down.
Yeah. And he's got a fresher scar here, so I'm gonna stop about there. But you could take this like so and stretch, but I'm not gonna stretch a fresh scar.
There you
So
are
these
again.
next two techniques are in areas that can feel more vulnerable. So you can either modify them or not do them if you don't have permission to touch those areas. You can also do them through the sheets. So the one would be from again, you can work through the sheets, but the thing with MFR is you don't want the sheet to be the limit. So what that means is like if this sheet was really tight and I was like stretching over the sheet, I'm not going anywhere, right? So if I'm going over the sheet, I can just make it loose so that when we do the MFR, the sheet has somewhere to go. Yes.
Oh, so what about for like the draping for girls? How does it-
Yeah, so we're actually going to do that on draping another day, but basically you can take a pillowcase or a towel. There's several methods that accomplish the same thing. You can cover the breast area from here to here, then have the client hold the top or you hold the top, and then you pull it down so that the towel stays there. Here, and then as you pull down, that towel's going to stay here. I honestly hardly ever work this area undraped, and so I never do that. A lot of people feel vulnerable. They don't really like that area massaged directly unless that's kind of the focus. Sure. So this way, another method around undraping the chest is to bring the two sides up and to bring the middle down if you want more direct contact on the sternum, but we can also just work again through the sheets. Now, male, female, non-binary, whoever, you can use the side of your hand, your ulnar border, to stay between breast tissue. So I'm on the sternum here. And again, like the scalp, this area is kind of similar to the scalp in the sense that there is fascia here, but you know, even if the person has strong pecs, in the middle, right, the bone is right there and there's not as thick a fascia. So it's kind of like the way you would engage the scalp by kind of catching hold of that fascia. Yeah, it's beautiful to see you guys practice on yourself. And it's more about you engage that fascia and you stretch it. It's not so deep, right? And you can stretch just in one direction, or you can stretch your inferior hand down and your superior hand up. People are very vulnerable in this area all the way from the notch. So of course we don't want to slide in that area or encroach in that area. So even if you're physically only touching them here, you don't want to absent-mindedly do movements that feel like you're encroaching their neck. Which could include body mechanics of not hovering. I want to get back in my own personal space and leave his head alone. I'm shortish, but people who are tall, when they do MFR, sometimes it looks like they're way back here. So it can be like a stretched out technique, but that's me stretching out. 5'5" at 51 years old. That's my stretch. You got it right there. Woo! All right, now remember that first fascial slide we saw and how the really cool tissues cross the sternum? So even though, you know, kind of the picture is sort of showing this up the midline, we've got our crisscross patterns of handedness and so forth. So the fascia of the pecs will literally cross right over the sternum. And so we can do some of our work like crisscrossy as well, which could be both sides at the same time, could be focused on one side at a time. Thing here is we want to unwind it. Whatever that helps the unwinding the best is more important than, you know, looking like a textbook picture of a cross-handed stretch. Now, this is an area a lot of you have been asking questions about, like how much pressure to apply. This is in an area where it's a lot more about the crossward motion than the downward motion. So I'm just deep enough to engage those muscles, but then I'm really focusing on a cross. And I can use my hands to push against each other. And of course, this one can go up into the deltoids as well. Now, there are arm lines as well, and we're not doing the arm lines. Some of this today, some of this is getting into the arm lines, but these connections address the superficial line as well. And again, we could work on the other side. Questions on the pecs and sternum?
And most people have really tight pecs and their fascia is really tight up in this area. Many people will come to you shoulders, neck, and you know, you've got to open up those pecs to really help the whole body. So this is something you will use.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much like almost everybody's tight shoulder issues very much related to their pecs. Very few people. You see the very few people with like the beautiful dancer posture, so much lift and pride in their stride. I don't work with many people with that posture.
Well,
The rest of us humans, we're like,
well, we're on our phones, we're on our computers, we're driving, we're doing all those front. That's right.
could someone read our last technique, please?
At the head of the client, one hand behind the head near the occipital ridge applies gentle traction while other hand resting on sternum applies gentle pressure toward feet.
Thank you. So now, you know, we remember there was some tightness in the neck here. This would be a beautiful time to help, you know, facilitate more connection and release between the front and the back line. So again, it might look like my right hand is just applying compression, but what it's doing is taking the fascia and stretching it. And I'm using the table to help me do that work. And then my left hand can add some traction. And I'll come back to the sternum, don't worry. Now, most clients love the feeling of traction, but you do want to apply this. And my right hand, by the way, is actually doing MFR down towards the feet, whereas my left hand is going to do some traction. But as much as people love the feeling of traction, you want to make sure you support their head and warm up their fascia enough that they're relaxing into it. And so if they feel like they're not relaxing into it, go ahead and give them more warm up and more support. Then you can make the connection between the sternum. I often use, again, my ulnar side. And I've got a lot of pressure, which is stretch. I don't want to like, I'm not doing CPR, right? So I'm not doing like a chest compression. I'm doing only enough pressure downward to engage the tissue, and then I'm stretching it down towards the feet. And if it feels like there's a lot of resistance or I'm fighting, you just add like a teeny bit of a twist and try different directions. One's going to want to go easier than the other.
With your right hand, you're slowly pulling it towards you.
Right, right. Yep. And think about MFR, kind of like pin and stretch. Like sometimes you kind of might lose the stretch, right? Sometimes you might kind of lose the tissue. And, you know, just be honest with yourself about it and just kind of start where you left off. If you're sliding over the tissue, you're not doing MFR. It's not the end of the world. It happens. But you kind of take notice of that and re-engage the tissue and start again. Otherwise, you know, if you're sliding over the tissue, you know, sometimes it feels good, but you know, you're doing Swedish, right? At that point, you're not doing MFR. Yeah. Now, notice, even though I'm wearing a mask, I'm sitting away from Taylor's head. It comes from 30 years of practicing with my head not right over the client's head. I think even though we have masks on and we're not breathing right over the client's head, it's still very uncomfortable to have an encroaching feeling, right? You don't want to get in their personal space. So as much as your body mechanic allows, you want to sit away from the person. And you want to be aware that your arm is also not encroaching in their space. You know, you don't want this to feel like you are getting in their face or their neck. And it's really cruising now. I'm like a really fast snail now. And we'll finish this up here. Do you have any questions? Because it feels like there's some like residual tightness in the occiput.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want to, you know, obviously we want to release that. That is really delicious to facilitate a release there. And you can use your other techniques. You can use your compression, you can use your petrissage, but you can also use your MFR. So support, occiput, and engaging, I'm stretching.
Do you ever do MFR using?
I do, yeah, I do MFR with the stones, hot or Himalayan, and with the cups, which we'll teach you the cups soon. Yeah, so you whatever tool you can grab onto, you can use this. In fact, the cups are quite interesting because we really want to get hold of the pattern of tightness, and we want to pull the tissue. There's some places where it's kind of hard to not slip over it. So sometimes you're at a real advantage to get hold of it with the suction of a cup and then pull on it. Yeah. And then may I touch your forehead and hair? You know, these two meridians go up and over. So, you know, you can help all the way up from the eyebrows. And that's where we're going to finish off. So anything else? All right, so it looks like it's time for lunch. Can we stop our recording, please?
Mhm.